This is Due South on WUNC News. I'm Jeff Tabiri. Charlotte is making a bid to try to host the Women's World Cup in 2031. Miller Yoho with the Charlotte Sports Foundation says Atlanta isn't the only hotspot for soccer in the South.
If you look at the number of large sporting events that have come to Charlotte over the past 10 years and continue to show up, you look at golf, you look at NBA All-Star Game, we are catching up and we will pass Atlanta, knock on wood.
Then later, you might remember the Chapel Hill music scene from the 80s and 90s. Well, Tom Maxwell, formerly of the Squirrel Nut Zippers, joins to reminisce and talk about his new book, A Strange and Wonderful Time.
We just gathered, and it was a community. A community was formed around not only making music, but consuming music.
Those stories ahead on Due South. First, the news.
From the American Tobacco Historic District in downtown Durham, this is Due South on WUNC News. I'm Leonida Inge. The 2026 Men's FIFA World Cup is in the history books, and it was a nail-biter. Spain pulled off the win, 1-0 against defending champion Argentina.
Porro chance to cross, hooks it in. Williams battling, knocks it down. It's free. It's a goal. It's Ferran Torres.
Because of all the hype and happening surrounding the World Cup and soccer, the Queen City, some sports fans, and tourism advocates are looking ahead to another World Cup, the 2031 Women's World Cup. North America will play host, and some in Charlotte say their city deserves to host a few matches. That sentiment is shared by Miller Yoho, Director of Communications and Marketing for the Charlotte Sports Foundation. We spoke with Miller a few weeks ago. Miller Yoho, welcome to Due South.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk.
Well, okay, Miller, why Charlotte? I mean, of course, I'm a little partial because this is not far from Durham, but why Charlotte?
Well, I think first off, North Carolina is a tremendous sports destination, and there's so many great professional teams, college teams. There's a legacy of it, and even if you look at soccer, Charlotte and North Carolina have tremendous success, and it really started years back. And I think it was 1994. We had the men's Final Four at Davidson College. I remember going to that as a kid, and then it's just been growth ever since. You have the introduction of Charlotte FC, which is one of the top in attendance in the MLS. You've had international matches, and just 2-3 weeks ago, we had the U.S. men's national team here, and 57,000 people came out on a Sunday afternoon to see for a send-off match, and it was incredible. And I think that shows just the power of the soccer as Charlotte as a sports city, and the opportunity for it to grow and potentially to host more events. And we cross our fingers. Hopefully, the Women's World Cup is on that list.
Tell me about that friendly match. I wanted to be there so bad when the USA played Senegal. It was dynamic, wasn't it?
Well, I'm going to tell two different parts of it. One is professionally, it was just incredible. It was a tremendous day for Charlotte. The streets were full, and the Senegalese fan, the U.S. men's national fans, the neutrals. It was just a day of celebrating the sport, sending both teams off. It was just a joyful day. But the second part is I'm a father of two, and I had two wild little gremlins in the stands who were wearing their full USA jersey, socks, shorts, and they fell in love with the sport that day. And every day since, they've been playing in the hall of our house, and they're call themselves Christian Pulisic and Tim Ream. And I think that shows the power of sports, and what is so exciting when you bring sporting events to a city like Charlotte is it's generational, and how it can change things and inspire people and really drive more fandom. So it's exciting to have that. And now the walls of my house are scarred because of that game.
Yeah, that's what it is. That's what's supposed to happen, kicking a ball around the house. So now we're talking about 2031. Why not? What's next? I'm sure the fever is high in Charlotte. Now we want the best soccer in the world there.
Yeah, and you say the world. Charlotte truly is an international city. We've hosted the NBA All-Star Game, the President's Cup, PGA Championship. We have a pedigree of hosting large events. There's been large international soccer events. I remember I believe it was the Copa America. It was the Uruguay played. It would have been Colombia. Tremendous match. There were 75,000 people in Bank of America Stadium. So we have it. We have the infrastructure with tremendous airport that can get anywhere, hotels, uptown accessibility. So yeah, the question is why not? It's certainly something we believe in. It's certainly something the city leaders, everyone wants, and now it's just starting down the process to see how do you get there. And we believe that anyone who comes to Charlotte, comes to North Carolina, will experience a city that's in love with the sport, in love with welcoming people, and is hospitable. And there's something special happening here.
Well, how much can you tell us? I know not a lot, but should we get our hopes up that maybe the Women's World Cup will play in Charlotte in 2031?
I think that's a great question. We're working through the details now, and it's always a process with these, and there's a lot of things that go into it. But what we have is a state government that's supportive. The Special Events Fund is tremendous and allows us to do so many things. And that was what helped bring the men's national team game. And I think the more people talk about it, show their excitement. I think also having that U.S. men's national team game was significant for the Women's World Cup because it showed that the crowds will show up, that there is the logistics, there's the city support. There was just so much positivity coming out of that experience that we showed that now we have the track record of success and can build off of it.
You're listening to Due South on WUNC News, and I'm speaking with Charlotte sports advocate, Miller Yoho. He leads communications for the Charlotte Sports Foundation. Now, this may be a sticky subject, but isn't Charlotte really just getting tired of being like the cousin of Atlanta? I mean, come on. I mean, when is Charlotte going to be chosen as a premier site for something like the World Cup?
No, I would reject that cousin.
Well, I have to say that because Atlanta is one of the host cities. I mean, and Charlotte is not. We just got a friendly match.
No, I think, and also I'd point out during that process that we were at different places as cities. They had the ability to do different things, and that bidding it's complicated and there's a lot to it. So I think it's not really an apple. It's more of an apples and oranges comparison.
Okay,
but I'll go, and I think this is an important point for folks to hear is it's true. Atlanta's been a event destination site in the Southeast. It's been number one. Like
the
that's
Olympics,
who we're competing
everything.
with. Yeah. Then you have Nashville. If you look at the number of large sporting events that have come to Charlotte over the past 10 years and continue to show up, you look at golf, you look at NBA All-Star Game, you look at the continued success of our events like the Duke's Mayo Bowl or the kickoff football games, you look at the international friendlies and soccer, we are catching up and we will pass Atlanta, knock on wood. I think what you're seeing is a state government that's incredibly supportive of special events and see the power of the economic impact, but also, we talked about my sons. That's a cultural impact of what large sporting events can do for the citizens of North Carolina.
So tell me about Charlotte FC. How is the team going? They can bring in the crowds too.
Yeah, no, I get to speak to this as a season ticket holder. I put my money where my mouth was 2 years ago, and I'm in section 206. We have 2 seats, and it has been one of the best investments we made. It's my date night with my wife, but it's been incredible. I would say that atmosphere, that crowd, it's diverse, it's energetic, it's passionate. It's different than a football game. It's not really comparable, but it is. That team has taken on the city's identity, how they play. It's exciting. There's stars on the team. And there's also just so much opportunity and possibility in the way that they've engaged the community, especially as a startup team, is it's shown that there's an interest in soccer, but they've really caught on and built on it. And they've been such advocates of the community. So I give Tepper Sports Entertainment, how they've gone about starting that team and growing it has been the right way. And now it's hard to imagine it's only 5-6 years old. It feels like it's been here forever, and it's such a part of the city and North Carolina, South Carolina culture to have an MLS team.
Money. Can you tell us about how much it costs, or possibly how much, with support from the state, of course, and from the city of Charlotte, probably the whole region, I mean, how many millions, I don't know, if not billions of dollars would it take to have the women here in 2031?
Well, that's a great question. And sports now does boil down to money a lot. And it goes beyond the infrastructure we talked, but also we're in a great spot where we are just going, a stadium renovation is about to start. So there'll be a brand new essential Bank of America Stadium ready to go. There'll be support from the city. There'll be support from the state. But what's also always existed in Charlotte is a private-public partnership that's done really, really well. And that's allowed us to bring so many events from both sponsorship, private support, but also from public entities, like you mentioned, the city and state. Now, I don't have an exact amount. I'm not going to guess. I'll get in trouble. My boss comes down here if I say a specific amount, but it will be significant. But what you'll see is the economic impact will far outweigh it. I would argue that in terms of investment with public funding, the economic impact of large sporting events is up there in terms of return on investment. What you see with tax revenue, direct spending, indirect spending. Across all of our events last year, we brought in $100 million of economic impact just from sporting events in the city of Charlotte last year.
Well, my last comment, and it is more of a comment than a question, I just want to make sure I can afford a ticket to attend, because that's been one of the biggest problems, biggest stories about the FIFA World Cup is that people who live even near and around Boston or, wherever it's Atlanta, everyday people can't even afford to go to these tickets that may even start at $1,000.
No, I'm so glad you brought that up, and that's something that FIFA controls and all that. And it's certainly, as an organized committee, if we were to bring it, I'm certainly U.S. Soccer, whoever would fight for tickets. But I think holistically, it's a conversation that needs to be had about affordability when it comes to sporting events. It's meant to be for kids, for people. It's meant to be a community event. So I know at the Charlotte Sports Foundation, across all our events, we have to hit our bottom line, but we constantly have a conversation about what's the affordability. How do you get a family of four in? That's what matters. Is if you're looking to create events, and us as a nonprofit, we're in a fortunate place where we're looking to create events that have that quality of life impact. So we got to make sure it's affordable, and we got to make sure we give those opportunities for folks to get in. So I would encourage people to keep talking. It's something that's important, especially as ticket prices continue to go up. We need to continue to have events and organizations like ours that are focused on creating community-wide experiences.
Well, Miller Yoho is the Director of Communications and Marketing for the Charlotte Sports Foundation. Thanks so much for joining us, and I'll see you at that Bank of America Stadium.
Thanks so much for having me.
You're listening to Due South. I'm Leonida Inge.
The following is a Due South encore presentation.
You're listening to Due South on listener-supported WUNC. I'm Jeff Tiberi.
And I'm Leonida Inge. Jeff, when you think of U.S. cities that are known for their underground music scenes, which ones do you think of?
Seattle, Portland, maybe like a Burlington, Vermont.
What? What about Chapel Hill?
Chapel Hill. No, or at least not before we got ready for this next interview.
Well, Tom Maxwell is a writer and musician whose new book is called A Really Strange and Wonderful Time, The Chapel Hill Music Scene from 1989 to 1999.
And he is also a member of the North Carolina Music Hall of Fame. Tom, welcome to Due South.
Hey, you guys. I'm glad to be here.
We're glad you're here. One of the really interesting things about this book is its hyper-local focus, right? We joke about Burlington, Vermont, or Portland off the top. But you try in this book, and I think you do, give readers a real sense, a deep dive of this region. So I'm interested, just right off the top, build on this for me, because you write, it all started with Cat's Cradle. Tell us a little bit more.
Cat's Cradle is a music club that's been around since about 1970. And is still around, and it's still owned by Frank Heath, the guy who bought it in 1986. Right now, it's about a little under 1,000-seat venue. That doesn't seem very big or very consequential. But I have to tell you that, like,
it's not a seat venue. I've been there many times. I have to stand up. I want to put that on the record.
it's about a 600 stand-up venue.
Thank you.
In the industry term. But I tell you what, the Cat's Cradle and Frank established itself as an anchor on a touring circuit. And so bands that were coming south from the Northeast, bands that were coming north from, say, Athens or Atlanta, would play Chapel Hill. And one of those bands, very sort of consequently, was REM, who started playing Chapel Hill, in the early 80s, and kind of helped put it on the map. And at the same time, local bands, and there were a lot of them, were being tapped to open for these touring bands. And so you got very young groups that would get exposure in the Cat's Cradle, and the Cat's Cradle kept growing. It started maybe holding 30 people, and it just kept getting bigger. And now I consider it an institution.
I always wanted to know, like you just mentioned about maybe the little smaller bands that were forming that wanted to open for the big groups. Mm-hmm. So when we think about this scene, are we talking about, say, students from UNC Chapel Hill? Maybe not all students. Maybe they were dropouts from UNC Chapel Hill, but who were they?
Everybody. You had Dexter Romweber, who moved to Carrboro when he was a child and was what we consider a townie. You had me, who went to UNC and was in bands before I even graduated. You had kids that were born here that went to Chapel Hill High that were in a ton of bands. But the university, as I say in the book, and this is similar to what was going on in Greensboro and Durham and Raleigh, was just basically a giant youth factory. And it was just cranking out smart, curious young people. And then once that energy was established where people were like, oh, it's a music scene, it's getting some attention, more people came, specifically to sort of get into bands.
Tell us a little bit more, if you would, about the vibe. I want to put my hands around it, right? I mean, was it anti-establishment? Was it a place to be free? Was it just a great third space for meeting and community? Like, take me back. I'm not quite old enough to remember it and or have experienced it.
You could have, Jeff.
Only 40.
Okay.
You can take a 7-year-old in there?
Oh, yeah. Okay. I'll take it back.
Well, as your elder, I will be glad to take you by the hand and introduce you to my former self.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The thing to remember then, or the thing to realize about that time, is that a lot of music was consumed publicly. So, yes, you would listen to radio in your car, but if you went to see a show, if you were interested in a band, you'd be out with your friends. We just gathered, and it was a community. A community was formed around not only making music, but consuming music. When I was young, I could, in the mountains of North Carolina, I could pick up the big Charlotte FM station. But for the most part, the top 40 radio was confined to whatever, the big cities. And my crowd was sort of underserved in the sense that the music that we liked was not being played on commercial radio. It was being played on college radio, and college radio was functionally a tin can and a string. I mean, WXYC might have been operating at 400 watts. So you could...
Cool acoustic. Is that what they call it? A cool acoustic guitar?
What they were was open format. They'd play anything. And I love the fact that they would play, and still do play, things I consider completely unlistenable. I love that. And you would just pick it all up. So you were either at the record store looking for imports from 4AD or whatever was coming from overseas, or you were listening to college radio. And then because of the relatively recent punk scene, the idea that you could do it yourself was very much established in our minds. So a lot of us just simply decided to create the music we wanted to hear.
There's a quote toward the end of the book that reads, "In Chapel Hill, you didn't have to be in love with the band. If they were your neighbors, you supported them anyway." So I was just mentioning, maybe you could talk more about, just all the support. That's why everybody could be in a band, right?
It was foundational. And I think when people think of music scenes, they think of the bands from that, Pearl Jam is from Seattle. But the scene was actually the people. The scenes created the bands instead of the other way around. And in Chapel Hill specifically, you had people who were fully committed to the welfare of this community, who actively participated in it, who hired musicians to work in their bookstores and restaurants and Kinko's copy stores, which don't really exist anymore. You had people who relentlessly came to shows, who forgave mistakes, who supported the second and third iteration of whoever's band. And you had people who, I don't want to get too Andy Griffith about it, but I think it definitely sort of informs. Like if there was competition, and there was competition, it wasn't in the sense of that someone else had to fail in order for you to succeed. It was in the sense that if you raise the bar, then the bar is raised for everyone. And it did very much feel that way. And so what came out of that was a sort of a maximal diversity of expression, as opposed to, oh no, we need to sound like whatever's popular.
Musician and writer Tom Maxwell, author of the new book, A Really Strange and Wonderful Time, The Chapel Hill Music Scene, 1989 to 1999. Jeff, those were some good years, actually, for me.
There were some great years, elementary school, middle school for me. And then
I had a child board.
Then on to high school. It was a wonderful decade. It was the last decade without the internet for everyone. We were outside more. Tom, before we want to ask you about your time with the Squirrel Nut Zippers, a very well-known entity around these parts. Before we do that, I want to build on something we were talking about a couple of moments ago. And you were talking about how the communities made the band. And this might be a throwaway, but I'm wondering if you can take it next level for us, right? Like I'm as somebody who came to North Carolina, I'm thinking about some of the cultural staples, whether it is vinegar-based barbecue or ACC basketball. Like, what was it that was unique about this music scene to North Carolina? Like, were there particular things available for sale, or what? Like, what was distinct about it that made this scene not Seattle or Burlington, Vermont, but very much North Carolina music?
A couple of things, I think. One is attitudinal and the other is geographical. There's a term called psychogeography, in which sort of the way that your environment, your physical environment influences your behavior. And one of the guys I talked to in the book is named Ron Liberti. Ron moved down from New Jersey when he was, 21. He had been in bands in New Jersey. The entire vibe up there was completely different. You did not want to play with bands that didn't sound like you. There was a kind of a uniformity, a kind of conformity of dress and aesthetic expression. And he comes down to Chapel Hill, and he's paying a lot of money to live above a liquor store in Montclair. And he comes down to Chapel Hill, and his buddy Mike, who had moved down a year or two before, is like in a place a much bigger place for the same money with like a porch. And you can walk everywhere. You can walk to go see all the shows. All these wonderful touring bands are coming through town. He's accepted immediately. He's encouraged to create his own expression. There was a sort of a relaxed observance. Brian Husky, who's now a much better known comedian than he was a bass player, told me about the relaxed observance around here and how he believes that's unique to North Carolina, that you just sort of observe what's going on and then repeat that. It's not hurried. It was not concerned with mimicry. It was concerned with authentic expression. Also, I think...
Didn't I read that your failures were forgiven?
They were. They were. And you were and so if you showed up with a musical saw or whatever, people would listen to you as long as you were authentically expressing yourself. That was sort of what got people engaged and interested. And normally what will happen when people do talk about music scenes is that they will flip the telescope around and look through the wrong end of it and think of it as a uniformity, the Seattle grunge scene. That's more of a capitalist, I think, sort of ranking, as opposed to anything that would be honestly reflective of whatever was being created in that place at that time.
Well, there are no Squirrel Nut Zippers like you guys. I tell you, I want to know where that name came from. We have an idea, but I mean, you have to put it on the record right now.
Well, you have to tell me the idea because it's probably more interesting.
No, I just heard maybe it was something you ate.
It was. It was. There was a candy, a cheap candy that had been around since the 20s called a nut zipper. Kind of like a Mary Jane, sort of a peanutty, caramely thing, pull your fillings right out. It was made by the Squirrel Brand Corporation, which at the time was based in Cambridge, Massachusetts, who started out making roasted nuts. And in the 20s, they invented this confection they called the Nut Zipper. And the reason they called it that was because they had invented the candy and they were casting around for a catchy name, and they were reading the newspaper. And in the police blotter, there was an incident that had happened when some guy got so drunk he got stuck up a tree, and the cops were like, "What are you drinking?" And he's like, "Nut Zipper." So they were like, "Okay, we'll call this the Nut Zipper." And so foolishly, and this was 6 months before I joined the band, it was decided to name the band after a product. This is a very 90s sort of approach.
All right, now if you know, you know, but if you don't know, and maybe somebody's hand here, mine, is raised, if you don't know about the Squirrel Nut Zippers, put a bow around it for us. What was the sound? What was the mystique that came to be?
It was people who had no business creating music that resembled pre-war jazz, and it was a band that was distinguished by having more enthusiasm than technical ability, myself very much included. But we were really, really into people like Fats Waller, Duke Ellington, Cab Calloway, other people like Skip James, Robert Johnson, Django Reinhardt and the Hot Club of France, and this sort of largely acoustic, exciting dance music.
Serious strike. Now you make the scene all day, but tomorrow they'll be held to pay.
And we wrote our own songs and created our own sound, I guess. And so the band formed in 1993. And at the time, it seemed like a deliberate step away from what was popular, because at that time, Nirvana had broken very, very big and were selling a whole lot of records. And so to go, the first thing I did when I was asked to join the Squirrel Nut Zippers was go buy a secondhand tuxedo. It just was, it's almost like a deliberate move away from anything that would be popular. But as it turned out, I wrote a top 20 hit, much to my surprise.
That top 20 hit, Hell, from the 1996 Platinum platinum certified album, Hot. Tom Maxwell here with us on Due South. We're chatting about the 1990s music scene in Chapel Thrill and also his new book, A Really Strange and Wonderful Time, the Chapel Hill music scene from 1989 to 1999.
Did you call it Chapel Thrill?
I did.
That's pretty cool. So I want to get to some of the artists that you mentioned in the book, like The Veldt.
Yes. Wonderful band. Wonderful guys. The Veldt came out of Raleigh, very much influenced by what was going on over there, which was a lot of punk, bands like Corrosion of Conformity. But they were very, very into English bands, so The Cure, Echo and the Bunnymen, the Cocteau Twins, stuff like that. Super into that. And they were fronted by twins, Danny and Daniel Chavis, who happened to be black, which didn't make a difference to anybody but people in major labels who ended up not knowing what to do with them. And when the Veldt came out, boy, they came out fully formed, flash, dressed to the nines, tight as ticks, and just everyone was like, oh, well, they're anointed. They got signed pretty quickly to Capitol Records, and then things sort of, their road was bumpy. But they're still around, and they're largely credited with being architects, I would say, of a type of music people call shoegaze, which is a very atmospheric and layered and beautiful.
I've never heard of that term, shoegaze, before. And that it also makes me want to ask you about how diverse this scene was. I know UNC Chapel Hill at that time was not diverse, that diverse, and neither is the town of Chapel Hill. But so when we think of these bands, I actually do think of a lot of white boys in garages, actually.
We were fairly benighted. But the vast majority of people in bands at that time, and this had as much to do with the time itself as the place, were white men.
Tom Maxwell is a writer and musician whose new book is called A Really Strange and Wonderful Time, the Chapel Hill music scene from 1989 to 1999.
More with Tom Maxwell and the Chapel Hill sound of the 1990s after the break. You're listening to Due South.
What's that you say? Oh man, no way. Lay down on it and everything will be alright. Don't hand me that. I'm alright, Jack.
The following is a Due South encore presentation.
We're back with musician and writer Tom Maxwell, author of the new book, A Really Strange and Wonderful Time, the Chapel Hill music scene, 1989 to 1999. Well, Zen Frisbee gets a lot of mention in your book, but I'm not sure that
They do.
Yeah, that they're as well known or well remembered as the other bands from that time period, but maybe you can talk about their history. How important were they?
I thought they were incredibly important. And one of the things I wanted to do with the book was to sort of take a slice of the cake and make a representative sample. I think a lot of people, again, with these kinds of retrospectives, will try to create a hierarchy. This band sold more records, right? And so this idea of the fact that you achieve some sort of quantifiable, measurable success is the same thing as whatever your value was. Well, I don't believe that for a second. And bands like Zen Frisbee and Metal Flake Mother were incredibly important to the scene.
You get tired and bored of town, for depression starts to bring you down.
Zen Frisbee was around, gosh, I'm not sure when they formed, maybe 1984. And they were all like, a lot of them were just Chapel Hill kids who played really strange and deeply original music.
I want to spend a little time on a much more challenging, sad thread from the book, if you're up for it. You do note
Sure.
that by the mid-'90s, the Chapel Hill scene changes both for your own group and for other acts. Drugs are a part of the ethos at this point, and you lose a former bandmate to an overdose, Stacey Guess. He passed away in 1998. He was only 33. Talk to us a little bit about the trajectory of Stacey's passing and how that influenced you and perhaps the scene as well.
Heroin had come through town, I think in the late 80s or early 90s. Some of the kids got caught up in it. Unfortunately, I think also that it was to some degree associated with the music industry itself. I don't want to get too paranoid, but there was a kind of control available to labels if they signed drug addicts. There is a story in the book of Dana Kletter, who is in a group called Dish, who were signed to Interscope Records, I think, and she told me that the label decided she needed an image, and so they decided heroin, that junkie would be an image, and they took her down to a neighborhood in LA and scored, and she said, I'm not going to do this.
Wow.
I remember doing a photo session with Squirrel Nut Zippers where the stylist started painting circles around our eyes, and he called it heroin chic. And I said, I'm not wearing that.
I hope not.
And so, because I didn't consider it chic at all, Stacey had gotten clean. But when you go on the road and the lifestyle is alcohol, marijuana, whatever, cigarettes, I think that the availability or the disruptiveness of being out on the road contributed to him reestablishing his addiction. Because of that, we asked him to leave the band until he got clean. And I was naive and thought that that would be sufficient motivation. I was wrong. He did get clean, but not to get back in the band. He just got clean. And I think what got him is that he climbed back on board, and is often the case with people who do get sober and then do heroin again, they overdose. And he died when we were out touring Europe, and it was unutterably sad. I'm not able to put it into words. And he wasn't the only one whose life was functionally ruined by this stuff that I genuinely despise.
What year was that again?
1998.
Okay. Because you had already reached some big success right before then.
Oh, yeah. We'd been shot out of a cannon, basically. You know, I'd say the previous year, that hot record went gold in the spring, which is 500,000 units shipped, I think, or sold. And then by the fall, it had been certified platinum. The thing that made me mad, well, about Stacey's death, apart from the futility of it, was the fact that now that was going to be his epitaph. It wasn't going to be this extraordinarily intelligent, creative, talented musician and visual artist. It was going to be that guy who died from an overdose. It infuriated me. And so often if I am asked about him, and I mean no offense, I'm asked about him because he OD'd.
So is it, when in 1999 when you left the group, correct? Was that a major reason why?
No. I left
Why
the group
did you
because
leave?
I left the group because I wanted to serve on a pirate ship and I didn't want to be in the Navy.
Really?
Yeah. And we were unable to make collective decisions functionally. And not only that, the Squirrel brand sued us, even though they told us we could use the name, and then they sued us. And so, because the old man...
you became a pirate.
In my personal life?
Well,
in a way, he's talking about the
with the name, and you take it away. Take it away.
Well, the Squirrel brand sued us because,
man,
and it turns out that all we had to do was just go register the name as a musical act. But of course, our lawyers neglected to mention that. But they did keep the meter running, and it got to the point where the Squirrel brand company said, we want a licensing deal and we want a percentage of gross receipts. And we want right of first refusal on album artwork, and we want to approve your songs. And I said, over my dead body.
You said, I'm a pirate.
Said, I'm out.
You're not coming on this ship. I'm a pirate.
I did. So I literally jumped ship. That was a part of it. And I also knew, now I look back with the sanguinity of middle age and just go, all things arise and pass away. And when you put more than one bull in the pasture, it's going to be a fuss. And there were, 3 bulls in that pasture. So we burned bright and we burned hot. It had its natural life. And I decided to leave a pretty corpse rather than keep flogging that thing, and become some, golden oldies review.
As you consume music today, whether that is from an auditory standpoint, if you're reading about it, having a conversation, what are the most notable, lingering impacts of the legacy from this 1990s era that you write about in your book? What is most omnipresent here in 2024?
Gosh, what a great question that I don't think I can answer, because I think you would need to talk. I mean, there is a certain amount of nostalgia. People will go back and say, oh, wow, reevaluate music from earlier times, choose the things that they like about it, if it's from 1983 to whatever. I know that, I don't remember her name, but a famous young artist just pulled the Breeders out, and the Breeders were a wonderful band from Boston with Kim Deal and her sister, put them up on stage and talked them up and talked about how great they were. I couldn't tell you necessarily that there's a legacy. Sometimes I will see bands and go oh, those are our grandchildren or whatever. Those are our kids, our aesthetic kids going out there playing banjos and weird stuff, but you'll have to ask whoever's doing it now.
I was walking around the newsroom at WUNC, saying I was going to chat with you soon. And just asking to see what bands some folks remembered. And one fella mentioned the Pressure Boys.
Yeah.
Tell me about the Pressure Boys. I'd never heard of the Pressure Boys.
I often take a look at the bright side of things, but there's only something else that I like to see. And the sun comes out at the regular time with the birds that have heard for the mailman. I've never been one to complain a whole lot. Join my life and the things gosh till the sun comes out at the regular time with the birds still saying.
Pressure Boys were a little bit of our forerunners. They're one of those bands that gave us permission. They were about, 7 guys. They're very influenced by ska music. Bands like Oingo Boingo, some English bands like English Beat. And they had horns and terrific rhythm section. Rob Ladd, who would go on to play on Alanis Morissette's debut record, played with Pressure Boys. And boy, they could sell out the Cradle, and they would put on a show, crazy high energy, super, super tight. And Mac McCaughan, who ended up in Superchunk, would follow them around, go to Greensboro Coliseum and look at them, watch them open for some big touring band. And, you would see bands like that and the Connells from Raleigh and go like, they're doing it. Look at them.
Yeah.
They're doing it. So maybe we can too.
In just our final couple of moments, I want us to go in a completely different direction. Might be a throwaway. Live fact check of sorts here. Wikipedia tells me that a few years ago, you moved into a home in Hillsboro, a mansion, former plantation home, ultimately moved out of said home in Hillsboro because it's haunted.
Yes.
Story, please. Details, please.
Oh, it was horrible. It was a horrible experience. And I wrote about it for The Bitter Southerner. The piece was called We Salted Nanny. So if anybody wants to read about it, they're welcome to read We Salted Nanny for Bitter Southerner. It was extravagantly, profligately haunted, not fun, enervating, exhausting. I saw things. My girlfriend, now my wife, saw things. My daughter saw things, heard things. A crazy smorgasbord of deep unpleasantness. And I couldn't even go into detail here, but we broke the lease and we got out. And we salted the place.
You salted it.
But I need a morsel here. Like, are there voices?
Yes.
I don't want, in all due respect, I have no idea what you encountered. I don't want to be triggering, but what are we talking about here?
We're talking about my daughter and my now wife hearing people asking them to come downstairs in my voice, which wasn't me. We're talking about the unmistakable sound of a car pulling into the driveway and the back door opening, but no one was there. We're talking about very strange, shadowy figures that appeared outside the house, one with whipping arms like tentacles, another that looked like a column of smoke tapered on both ends, floating about 2 feet off the ground, like a spinning top. I saw that one. We're talking about objects being thrown, people being scratched in showers, doors being flung open, a lady in an 18th century garb with a white bonnet constantly circling the house counterclockwise. So there are things that people would call residual hauntings, where it's just
that
a pattern.
sounds wild, and it sounds like it should be in the Bitter Southerner. It was an article. It
was completely out of control.
Wow.
And I will tell you that, like, not only did we leave, and we have been back to Hillsboro. We will not go within sight of the property.
Well, before we go, I wanted to tell you, Tom, about my last time that I think, visited Cat's Cradle. I know I've been there since then, but I was there to see Sharon Jones and the Dap Kings. And that was so special. And I wanted to meet her so bad. So one of my girlfriends, Catherine Walton, and I, we went to Crook's Corner where Bill Smith was running the show, who helped, get us to Cat's Cradle, and we got some of his banana pudding. And then we went to Cat's Cradle and we said, oh, we have a dessert for Sharon Jones. And they called her and we gave her dessert. We said, hi, we're here for the show. And it was the best. So I just want you to know I enjoy Cat's Cradle and all the alternative music that actually still makes it to Chapel Hill.
I worked at Crook's Corner. I tended bar there. I was there when Pink Floyd came in to eat dinner. This is going back a ways. And I know and love Bill Smith, interviewed him for Bitter Southerner. And Bill said, musicians and cooks are all dogs in the same pack as far as I'm concerned. And to have that experience that you had, where you could have access to this person, not just as someone who enjoys her music and see her performing, but to interact in a way and show that appreciation, that's incredibly special and very much, I think, a gift that Chapel Hill afforded us and still does.
Well, thank you, Tom Maxwell, a writer and musician whose new book is called A Really Strange and Wonderful Time, The Chapel Hill Music Scene from 1989 to 1999.
Tom, thanks for being here.
My dears, I enjoyed every moment.
This is Due South. Due South is a production of WUNC and a broadcast service of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill.
Our producers are Stacia Brown, Cole Del Charco, and Rachel McCarthy. Denarius Thomas is our technical director. Aaron Keever is our EP.
Our theme music is by Quilla. For more Due South, go to dewsouthradio.org. Download and subscribe to our podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen.
I'm Jeff Tiberi.
And I'm Leonida Inge. Thanks for joining us.
Each story you hear on Planet Money starts with a question. What happens if we refund tariffs? Why are groceries so expensive? At NPR, we stand for your right to be curious because the forces shaping our world can be hard to see. Follow NPR's Planet Money wherever you get your podcasts and start seeing how the economy really works.